Hi creators, welcome or welcome back to Academic Phoenix Plus. My name is Monica and I am here to show you how to texture a droid inspired by Star Wars. This video is brought to you by Autodesk, the design and make platform. Thank you for supporting and inspiring artists like myself and so many others. In the previous tutorial, I used Autodesk Maya to create a cute little healing droid inspired by Star Wars. I absolutely love using Autodesk Maya to create all of my 3D modeling assets. Great for modeling, UV mapping, rigging, animating, rendering, and so much more. So if you're interested in learning how to create art using industry standard software, then I highly recommend Autodesk Maya. I don't know if you've seen the trailer, but there is a new highly anticipated Star Wars series called the Acolyte. And there it will introduce Pip, a chipper handheld repair droid customized with a wide array of tools, attachments, who is always eager to help. Little Pip was designed by the creature effects legend Neil Scanlan, who is using Autodesk Fusion to bring the lovable droid to life. Catch the 2-episode premiere of the newest Star Wars original series, The Acolyte, streaming on Disney+. Let's go ahead and open up Maya and get started in texturing my little healing droid inspired by Star Wars. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, my droid is already UV mapped. If you want to see a video of that, let me know because I have it pre-recorded. Once your robot is UV mapped, let's go ahead and export it as an OBJ and bring it into Substance Painter. In Substance Painter, we're going to go ahead and bake out all the maps. That includes the occlusion, the world, the curvature, everything that drives Substance Painter to do the really awesome art. So once all of that is baked, let's go ahead and start exploring all of our incredible shaders that Substance Painter provides for us. Now, this is a droid, so the idea is that it does have metal underneath, and then it's going to have some sort of plastic covering on top of that. So in this case, I'm exploring the different types of metals, and then I'm also exploring the different types of plastic material. And my favorite one was Plastic Dusty. You can see that it really adds personality to my droid and makes him look a little messy. Now, always open up those folders and check out what is driving this shader. And as you can see, the dirt on the edges are really strong. So I'm going to go ahead and calm it down and even reduce the opacity so that I get to have a mix of both the metal and also the plastic. Next part is going to be the panels. You can't have a droid without panels. So I'm going to create a layer that has a height of like a -0.6, and then I'm going to grab a basic hard brush, turn on symmetry, and then start drawing. Now you're going to see me struggle a little bit here because to create a straight line in Substance Painter, you have to hold down Control W and hit the buttons just right, and as you can notice, I'm struggling, but eventually I get it, and then I'll be able to create my panels with no problems. So the nice thing about this method is that I can also create 45-degree angles, and it's really easy and fast. Now remember, my UVs are straight, so therefore I'm getting these really nice results. If my UVs were slightly crooked, I would have to compensate for that. So make sure that when you guys UV map, that your UVs are going up and down in a way that's really easy to capture. After that, I decided that now that I have some basic paneling, I created my own alpha brush, which is just a curved rectangle, and I'm going to use that to create a side panel. This time I grab an aluminum brush or aluminum brushed worn shader, and I just kind of stamp it in on the side of the droid. Then I click on X to get the black mask, and I paint some of that out. And the purpose for this is to create like an aluminum edging around my droid. I want to make sure that it still looks plastic but also robotic. Once I do that, I also increase the height, I turn on my panels, and then I want to make sure I remove whatever needs to be removed. Now that I've removed that extra little panel, it's time to add a little bit more panels. Make sure that your paintbrush is in white. You're using a black mask, which means you won't be able to see the shader unless you're using a white brush. So go ahead and grab that white brush and make those details. Sometimes you gotta go in really close to the map. So you'll notice that sometimes I use the 2D UV map and sometimes I draw on the 3D model itself. So it really depends what type of needs you have. Now I'm working on the shoulder, and again, because I purposely made my shoulders straight, it's really easy to create those panels and details. Now you'll notice that in the 3D droid, on the 3D model, there is like silver lining around it, and I will remove it later. I thought for a bit that it actually looked kind of decent, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll keep it that way. But then I decided that it just looked a little too messy, and I decided against it. So you'll notice that you can either paint on the 2D map or on the 3D model, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. You just have to go through and see which way it works the best, and then go from there. Again, I like to go in and change my detailing just to make sure it looks okay. And again, you'll notice that I flip from the black and white depending on my needs. So I'm clicking the letter X on my keyboard so that it goes from black to white. Now what's nice about this is that I can also use that to create 50% gray, which kind of goes in the middle of having something and not having something, which I'll demonstrate in a second. Now, as you can see, we have a variety of tools that we can use, and what I'm looking for is the plus sign. And why is that? It's because I need to make sure that this looks like a droid, a medical droid. So what I'm doing is exploring what material do I want. I thought that it looked cool, but it doesn't apply for my machine, this chrome blue tint. I thought it was neat, but I'm not going to use it. Instead, I just grabbed a regular layer and I made it into blue, and I'm going to increase the emissiveness, make it a little bit metallic, and remove everything that I don't need, such as the opacity and the normal. Add a black mask, and then I'm going to grab a brush, which is going to be my medical sign. So nothing screams like a medical droid as much as a plus sign. So here I am plugging it right in the middle, so anybody that sees this will know immediately that this is a droid that is for medical. And I also reduced the height just to make sure that it sticks in a little bit. And now I'm changing the color because I'm trying to find that perfect blue that says medical. Sci-fi medical. All right, it is coming along. As always, go ahead and explore Substance Painter because there's a lot of really great brushes and textures that you can use. And if you have your brush and then you double click on it, it will actually change the brush to that particular sign, which is great. All right, it's time to create more detailing. I'm going to do a beige color. Again, I'm going to add a black mask. And then with this brush, with the rectangle brush that I created, I'm going to go ahead and add some details. Now, this is going to be asymmetric. I'm adding a little bit of a brush here and I'm going to make it into a little bit of a medium gray or a light gray. I try to bring that up. I thought it would look good that way, but it doesn't. I decided to look for some lines and I found some lines. So I undid that and I used these lines to create a little bit of a paneling pattern, which I thought actually worked out pretty well. So then I decided to repeat that at the bottom. I'm going to turn on symmetry and I'm going to go to the bottom of my droid and do something similar but bigger. And same story, I'm going to click at the bottom, have symmetry on, then I'm going to find my lines. I'm going to reduce my color to like a light gray and add that in. Next, I found some little screws and I decided to go ahead and add them because this droid is supposed to be functional, but it's also supposed to be constructed. So I decided to add those little screws as details. Again, it's about big details, then medium details, and then small details. The next part is adding another square at the center bottom of the droid, and this time I wanted to add a little bit more medical symbols. So in this case, I'm going to add a orange layer, and I'm also going to increase the height, but also I'm increasing the emissiveness because I want this to actually glow. I felt that I needed a little bit more details because, again, we have a lot of big details and some medium details, but I really want to make sure I have my small details. So I go ahead and use those lines again that are going diagonal this time and then remove anything that I don't need. And I think that it adds a little extra detail. So I've got my big designs, my little designs, and then I have my small designs. Again, I'm using basically almost all the tools just by Substance Painter, and it does some really great stuff. Since I have this emissive map, I might as well go ahead and bring my little lights to life. So I'm using my UVs to figure out what the colors are and make it glow. I had a metal texture that I'm going to use to make things silver-like. So I'm going to drag that metal all the way to the top to make sure we can see that metal. Now I'm ready to add more details to my object, such as the antenna. The antenna, I wanted it to be more silver-like so that it stands out a little bit more. And then some other areas as well, such as the tires or the gears for the feet and other places. So I wasn't a fan of all these designs. So what I'm using is the tool that removes designs based on UVs. So having the color black, I just click on the UV shells and you can see now the silver lining is only around the side of the robot. Okay, now I'm ready to start texturing the eyeball as well as the metal glass on the side. This is also going to be emissive. I want it to glow, but I also want it to make it look like glass. So we do have a glass visor shader that we can use in Substance Painter, and I'm going to go ahead and paint that in two areas. One's going to be the eye and the other one's going to be the jewel on the shoulders. Now I am going to be making this emissive, and I also want that blue to match the cross across the front of the robot. So my theme here is that the color is going to be blue and orange, which are complementary colors. And then I have all my whites and grays, which are my neutral colors. So when you guys are designing your robots, it's important to think about what type of colors you're going to use. And of course, complementary colors are one of the easier ones to create. Okay, my little robot's coming along. I've got the big designs, I've got the little designs, and I've got even smaller, but I still have a ways to go because I want to make sure that everything has panels and it's got a lot of details. All right, we're exploring a little bit more. This is going to be for the feet. As you can see, I am using that handy tool that uses UVs to texture. So everything is a black mask, and then with the white color, I can bring some of that metal out. So now I'm using the same tool, but instead of using the UVs, I'm actually grabbing faces so that I can create silvers around the shoulder. So I'm trying to diversify the color of the shoulder. Now again, my UVs are straight, so it's going to be pretty easy for me to select this particular colors. And if you need to switch back and forth from black to white, you just hit the letter X and very quickly you can remove some. So lucky for me, my UVs are straight, and therefore I can just click and drag and select the faces that I want with the texture. Now symmetry is on, so whatever happens on the left side happens on the right side. All right, he's coming along. Now I felt that the asymmetry was a little too blank on the left side, so I decided to go ahead and add a square with a design to it, and then also create a white layer to help balance everything out. So once again, I have a white layer, and then I have a black mask, and then I'm going to be using this little plus sign or the healing sign to be able to create a very simple design. Again, it kind of helps offset the symmetry and makes it more interesting to look at. Still screams medical. Now I felt like the cross was a little bit too clean, so I went ahead and added a noise to the specularity, so it's a little bit metallic and a little bit rough, so that when the camera and the lighting moves, then it captures some of that really nice lighting and specularity. So just kind of helps break up the color as well. I want this robot to look a little dirty, and that cross was a little too clean, so that's why I added that texture. I'm continuously tweaking the dirt because I want to make sure it is dirty but not too dirty. And now I feel like I'm in a really good balance. So now it's next is about more details on the robot. I feel like the front looks really good. Now it's time to go ahead and add a little bit more to the sides. So I grabbed a square and I'm going to add a little bit of that fun texture just to make it look a little bit interesting. And then, as always, since this is supposed to be a little droid, it's going to have a little bit of that emissive lines and that I wanted to add. So again, hold down Control Shift and you can get some straight lines. I felt that looked too much like an equal sign, so I offsetted it a little bit more to the top of the piece, so it looks a little bit asymmetrical as well. There you go, starting to kind of balance things out. Again, I felt like it's the side of the droid needs a little bit more detail, so I went ahead and added a rectangle, and I wanted to put a little bit of a blue emissive up at the top to again balance things out, but I wasn't convinced by the white, so I decided to try a little bit of silver instead, and I felt that worked a lot better. And I like that method as well, so I went ahead and did the same thing on the side just to add a little bit more texture on the side. Now I'm going to start adding a little bit more details to make it look like a panel. It needs to have a screw or something to hold it together. So I decided to create a copy of the panels and reduce the height a little bit. And just use that and create a little bit of color just to make sure that when I hit it, it gives a little bit of tone. So you can see that I'm just going to go in and just add little screws next to the panels depending on where they are. Now they're not going to be symmetrical. I'm going to make sure they're kind of oddly placed. Again, it's just kind of putting the droid together, and whatever covering it used to have, it's gone, but it also gives it the idea that it's built, and it also gives it small details. So that's the important part here for me, is that this little droid has large details and then it's got little details. So these little screws are little details to make it more interesting to look at. Now I'm going to go to the shoulder because I feel like it's a little flat. So I'm going to go through and create a map that's just going to affect the height, no colors, which I felt would add to this piece. Now I noticed that I didn't turn on symmetry, so don't forget to turn on symmetry, and let's go ahead and add the details. Now my UVs are not exactly perfect, so you're going to see it warp a little bit, but in general I think most of the details will be just fine. I am going to remove some of the bottom because they are a little warped and you really don't need it. And then you'll notice that in that corner here that no one's gonna see, it's a little off. So if this was an industry piece, I would definitely fix those UVs and make sure that they were perfect. But because this is a really fast tutorial, I'm gonna leave it as is. So I'm going through and making sure that everything is nice and clean. And now it looks like my shoulder has a little bit of texture to it, which is nice. Again, it makes it feel more mechanical. You need some screws. So here I am adding a couple of details. Don't forget to turn on symmetry when you need it and go through and either draw it on the model or draw it on the 2D mode, and you can get the results really quickly. All right, it's coming along. Next, I'm going to be adding a height in and then a height up so that I know which panel affects which section. So in this case, I'd add a little bit of dark color, and I wanted to make sure that whatever the light colors get pushed out and the dark colors get pushed in. So in this case, I'm trying to add a little bit more detail into my object. So I wanted to have a circular joint around the arm, and then I wanted to add a little plus sign in the center of the circle. I wanted to make sure it stood out a little bit. So that's how I got that design, which I think it actually looks kind of cute. It's a small detail, but it's really fun. I use something very similar to the gears. The concept is that I took a large circle so that it gets pushed in, and then I grabbed a little bit of that screw and then it gets pushed out, and that's how I got those results. You'll notice that once again, I'm trying to use the 2D, but it keeps stamping other different places, so I'd rather just go ahead and do it on the 3D model itself. Took a little bit of camera work, but I got it to work. So now I'm drawing a panel for the side of the arm, the elbow. I used height down to create those details. And again, it creates this really nice paneling look. So it feels like it's being built in separate panels. And that's how you get an arm. All right, next I'm going to start working on the antenna, and I'm going to be grabbing the UVs, using that grayish brown and using that to color the antenna. I also want to use the orange lighting to kind of give it a little bit of an interesting texture. So I went ahead and painted on there just a little bit of a emissive orange just to kind of balance things out a little bit. All right, so now we have our antenna, we have all of the pieces, and now I'm starting to diving in to the lower parts of the robot. So the robot's feet are pretty simple, so I'm going to go ahead and add some paneling to make it look more interesting to look at. I decided that the paneling would look better if it had a little bit of color, and so I decided to go ahead and do it on a different layer that goes in, and then I used the white to bring it up, and that's how I got a little bit of a colored paneling. Now one more details is on the tubes on the feet. So you'll notice that I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of panels inside the feet just to kind of break it up a little bit and make it more interesting to look at. Now there is a little discoloration in the panels in the foot, so I went ahead and painted it out. And there you go, just adding that really adds to the detail of the droid. I felt that this portion also needed a little bit of detail, so I went ahead and used a rectangle brush that I came in to create a panel just to make it a little bit more interesting to look at. I felt like it should be more of a pushed in panel, so that's pushed in, and then I'm going to bring it out, so that gives it a little bit of an indentation. Again, these are very small details, but it adds to it. Next, I have gauze, and I want to use material to create the texture. So I thought the green one was appropriate. Again, add that black mask, use the model selection to just focus on that, and I did like the texture of it, just not the color, so I went ahead and changed the base color to something a little bit more white, and then I played around with the bumps and the lines and everything in the mask so that I can create a much more interesting looking piece. Now again, it takes a little bit of practice to figure out which is the right slider to pull, but eventually I got to this and I thought that was appropriate and it looked nice, and I'm happy with the fabric for the gauze. Next comes the bottle. And again, I wanted to make it feel that this is a medical robot. So I grabbed the square and I used the white color, and then using the blue cross, I went and added it in there. So very quickly I got it to work. And then after that, I decided to go ahead and paint the top of the bottle that same blue. Again, it's all about finding that balance. So you have a big cross with the big details. I have the eyeball and the jewel for mid details, and now I have a little cross and a little bottle with the blue. So it's all about big details and little details, especially since the color is really important here. All right, more details for the circles so that it's more engaging to look at. And now I'm interested in actually kind of breaking it up a little bit. I'm grabbing some paintbrushes that can create some cracks and just a little bit of wear and tear on my little droid. So again, small details, but it really adds extra elements to it. Now I'm interested in doing rust. This is where even though my droid is looking a little old, I wanted to make sure that it's extra old, like extra worn. So I created a layer to create some rust to my droid so it feels a lot older. So now that I've got the color of rust that I wanted, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of cracks and a little bit of a variety of brushes to try to get some interesting textures on my droid. Now, what's fun about this is that it does have these like laser blast things that I can use, which makes it look like it's splattered. I can actually click on it, which creates a blast, or I can drag it, which also makes this really interesting texture. So I decided to go ahead and do that. It also has a bunch of brushes that I can use. I recommend that you play around with them. This one's a fracture. It didn't work, but it's fun to just kind of watch it. This one is known as a laser impact, and it looked more like a drawing, so I decided against it. And it also has leaks and drips and all sorts of things. So I thought that it would be good to add a little bit of rusty leaks around areas such as the bottom of the eye. Now, I do encourage you guys to explore these brushes, the dynamic brushes. They're super fun. Just look up dynamic up at the top and it'll show you all the dynamic brushes. So I thought some leaks would be nice to add to the rust of the object. So it feels like things were dripping on this character, that he's actually outside and rain came on him and the rust kind of leaked. So it's super fun. This is a really fun exploring option. Then I thought that it would be better if I painted some of the area in. So the eye should be rusty. Certain areas where the paneling is should be a little bit rusty. The feet should have more rust, so on and so forth. So I wanted to make sure that I painted it in a way that it made sense. So anywhere that it can get rust is usually around areas where like nooks and crannies and things like that. So areas where the robot pieces rotates, things like that. So I'm going to go through and just add my own rust using this dirt brush, which I actually really like this dirt brush. Now I felt like the cross was a little too pretty, so I wanted to add a little bit more. So now you're going to see that I'm adding some more laser blast, and then I thought it'd be better if I go ahead and fill in some of those holes and just add a little bit more rust around the edges. So that's where I got the textures of my rust. Probably could have added more and maybe subtracted more, but okay. So next is I want to make this into a Star Wars droid. So I created a fill layer, and what I'm going to do is go into Photoshop and create the text. I downloaded the alphabet of Star Wars, and this is HD, which stands for Healing Droid. And then I wrote 2.5 because that's how old my daughter is right now. So I was like, I know HD 2.5. So Healing Droid 2.5. That's where my rationale came from. So in Photoshop, I created those, and then I'm going to merge them. I'm going to save it as a PSD because maybe I want to manipulate it later. But let's merge them, flip the colors, and then go ahead and save it as a PNG. So this is going to be my texture. That's the way I did the rectangle too. Then I'm going to bring in this texture, and I'm going to use it as an alpha so I can use it as a brush. So again, just double click on it, get close, and there you go. Just like that, I've got my HD 2.5, my Healing Droid. I went ahead and was playing around with the size. I decided to make it a little bigger and add a little bit more at the top, again, to make it more asymmetrical. So made it a little lighter gray, and I felt like that looks good. I also wanted to make sure that this robot existed in Star Wars universe, so I made a alpha of this symbol, which is the Republic, and I didn't realize that there were so many symbols in Star Wars, so I thought this one was a cool one. So I brought it in, created it as an alpha, and decided to decorate this robot with this logo. So I went ahead and placed it in the only area that had a circle on it, so I went ahead and added that there. I thought I could put it somewhere else. It didn't feel right, it didn't feel like it fit, so I went ahead and just kind of put the logo in a really nice circular area to make it all fit in. And there you go. That is how you can create a droid, texturing a droid using Substance Painter. Now the magic happens is exporting the textures into Maya for the final render. So let's go ahead and bring in the Arnold AI Standard preset. Make sure you place it somewhere that you can find it. So source images is a great place. I'm going to remove height because I don't need it. I'm going to choose a 2K texture, which I think will work, and then export. Super fast, super great. And then in Maya, there is a Substance Painter apply texture maps, which will actually do it automatically for you. So you just have to select them, grab them, and then automatically puts all the textures together. Then I'm going to assign the AI Standard surface, press the number 6, and there it is. So let's create a disk to make sure it's sitting on something. I'm going to go ahead and render it out to show you what it looks like so far. Want to make sure it's nice and high quality. And again, I'm just going to kind of look at it. There it is. Nice and textured. But that's not where the magic really happens. The magic happens is when you use an HDRI. I have video tutorials on how to do this, but find yourself an HDRI, create a dome, and go ahead and pick one. Now, the challenging part for me was finding which one do I like. Do I like this one? Do I want this one? Do I want this one? And I really do like the evening and sunset ones, but if I really want to show off my textures, I should probably pick something a little bit more conservative. So I really liked the night one. I thought it was beautiful because it really brought out the emissiveness and things like that. But at the end, I end up with something a little bit more natural. I'm going to go ahead and relabel this, make sure that my emissiveness is raw. And so therefore the glowing can be significantly brighter. There you go. You can also increase the weight. You don't have to be stuck at 1. You can always type it in. Okay, you want to grab the light, increase the intensity, change the camera value to 0 so there is no background, and there you go. That's how you can get a HDRI nice quality render. Now again, I wasn't too convinced with it. I think it's pretty, but I thought this one might be more appropriate because it shows the glowing and it also gives you some reflections. So I was debating between the two. You tell me if you guys thought one was better than the other, but I felt like the night one looks really nice. I love the reflections, but the issue was that it takes away from all the other details that I have because I'm just focusing on the pretty colors and reflections. So for something a little bit more conservative, I decided to choose something else. I also decided to add an imager called the lens effect, and this will give you a glowing effect with bloom. Now this is a little over top, but I thought it was fun. So you can add a little bit of a vignette, which adds a little edges, dark edges around your image, and then you can control the bloom by typing it in or using the slider. So it's a really fun effect to add to your character. So check it out. It's under Imager. It's in your render settings. There it is. So one without, one with, and it just kind of adds a little bit of extra elements into your render. This is the fun part. This is when you finally get to see all your work and you get to create it and just kind of play around with it. All right, so I'm going to be doing a bunch of renders, and then I'm going to change it again because I wasn't sure if this is the right one. So again, I want to show off the textures, and I decided to use this one, and I rotated it so to make sure that I can get nice lighting. All right, there it is. I did want the floor to be a little bit more reflective, so I added a standard surface shader. I added a tiny little bit of color to make it more interesting to look at, and I also wanted to make sure that it was gray so that the robot stood out, not the floor. And it's got a little bit of reflection, which makes it again more interesting to look at. I made it more intense, the lights, so I can get a nicer render, and I'm going to keep exploring this until I'm happy with the results. This is when I'm playing with the vignette, and this is when I'm playing with the bloom, so I can get a nice little glow around the edges. Okay, now in Photoshop, to add that extra 10%, I'm bringing in a little bit of smoke, and I'm also bringing a little bit of sparkles or sparks so that it makes it look like he's in some sort of battleground. So again, this is the last thing I do, is make sure that my object is rendered, and then I'm going to add a black background, create a vignette by blurring it, and now I get this really nice effect. So that is basically my final look, that I get to create a vignette. I add a little bit of extra elements in the back just to make it more interesting to look at, and that is how I created my droid. This is the one with just the fancy colors. Again, I felt like this one was better, but there is a sunset version out there. And as always, bring in a curve and just color correct. This is where you can add a little bit of color. I've decided to go a little bit more in the blue side, and that is how I made my droid. So you can see, generally very quickly, you guys can create some really cool effects using Substance Painter, Autodesk Maya, and throw it in for some post in Photoshop.
Autodesk. Make anything.